Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the GenAI CIO Podcast, where we cover the latest and the greatest in the world of generative AI to help the CIOs across the globe leverage generative AI in their applications and their businesses. Today is a very special episode. Unlike Shiva and I doing the podcast to probably share updates, I've been joined with a very special guest from AWS. So before we begin, here's your host Rishabh again, founder and CDO for GoML, which is a generative AI niche consultative services partner. And I've been joined today by Victor Rojo, who is the worldwide global head for the Generative AI Competency program with partners at AWS. He's the one who's actually been very keen joining, designing a lot of these specialized generative AI programs specifically aimed at partners and customers in AWS. And first of all, Victor, it's really good to have you on the program, and thank you so much for doing this for our listeners today. Uh, Victor, why don't we probably spend some time in understanding what you've been up to at AWS, from generative AI perspective, and how you've actually built all these programs for our listeners.
Thank you, Rishabh. First of all, thank you for having me here in your podcast. It is great being here. I'm honored. Uh, Actually, I will introduce myself. I'm Victor Rojo. I'm working in AWS as a principal tech lead for the Generative AI Competency Partners program. I'm also leading other competencies, for example, conversational AI and machine learning and AI competency programs. I've been on the field since almost 6 years ago when everything started with Amazon Alexa for me in Mexico. When everybody thought that Alexa was like that artificial intelligence that was going to conquer the world, just plug and play, and it was going to be like the doomsday for everyone. No, it didn't happen. And eventually, Alexa brought me here to the US to launch it in Spanish language. And after a successful launch, I decided to start working in AWS in initiatives like contact center intelligence, conversational AI, of course, and intelligent document processing. I'm now helping the partners and in general with a customer forward mindset to help with the adoption of generative AI.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks, Victor, for that introduction. And I remember the days, right, that when we were using Lex, like for building a lot of these chatbots across. And I remember the days that we'd spend so much of time creating those intents, entities, feeding the engine and so on, right? But we've come a long way since then, right? So what would be very interesting to understand, right, that you interact with CIOs globally, right, Victor, either through partners or directly with customers and so on, right, especially on their GenAI initiatives, right? But what are these trends of adoption within the GenAI space that you're actually seeing with these CIOs across, right? If you can probably spend some time on that.
Uh, that's a great question. And when thinking about what the CIOs are thinking about adoption, I believe there are different aspects that can be reflected in the competency program, essentially. Uh, when the partners are applying to the program, what we are looking for is aspects that CIOs are thinking about. For example, and the first step is how do I start adopting generative AI? How do I start with the internal teams to identify what is the use case more representative that I can use to start using generative AI in the company? Uh, some other aspects that also are important for them is at what level of maturity I'm as an organization, uh, what is the roadmap that I could define in order to start growing. Maybe I started small and now how do I start expanding these initial projects that I did with generative AI and my team. And also important aspects related to skilling or upskilling the teams. It's something important. Other aspects are related to what roles are missing or what new additions I need to do to my team. And finally, and not less least important, is security. Security, it's an important aspect that most of the CIOs, in conjunction with CISOs, are thinking about when being challenged with the adoption of generative AI. It's a technology that everybody's using. The users out there now have more access, and this is what I can share with you.
No, those are all really good insights, right? I think similarly, when we also interact with CIOs today on their GenAI initiatives, I think the top two concerns, as you rightly mentioned, is one is talent, right? Like, even if probably we help them build these applications, how do they scale internally? How do they upskill their talent to probably take some of these initiatives? And number two is, as you highlighted, probably security, right? Like, how do probably some of these open source models or closed source models actually, help them still retain ownership of their data and so on, right? So while you've already highlighted one major concern, which is security, right? But are you seeing any other concerns when it comes to GenAI adoption with these CIOs across your interactions, right? Apart from obviously security and data privacy.
Yeah, in terms of security, it's as I was telling you, they cannot contain the employees. What I've noticed, they are trying to find out, and some already did it, uh, finding out the right permissions and also how, at what limits users can rely on generative AI. Not everything can be used in a big bang way, like,
Yes.
hey, here's Gen AI and let's use it for everything in a pervasive way. But at the same time, they are allowing the employees to use it to start maybe accelerating certain tasks that they do in their day-to-day job. In other cases, the validation of the content that is generated, it's another concern for them because, as you know, the non-deterministic nature of the models leads to hallucinations, and these hallucinations sometimes may lead to uh, uncontrolled behaviors, answers, and content that could put into question the reputation of the company. It's an important aspect. Uh, on the other side, thinking about data, the CIOs are finding out what data it's a good fit for their projects. Not all the data that they have is they have access to all of it, or it's not in the way that they thought it was going to be useful. So they need to start uh, also narrowing down what data they will use, how they will use it, and very important aspects related to compliance. What is the way I will use it into these black boxes at some point that represent the foundation models or large language models, and where is going this data that includes at some point customer information that it's the most valuable uh, asset that the CIOs have in the companies.
Absolutely. Again, all good points. But I think one major point that you've highlighted, Victor, which we are also seeing consistently, is how do you control the output of these large language models? Right? How do you manage the hallucinations? Because that could be a devastating, outcome for some of these business use cases, especially in the financial services and the healthcare sector that we work in, right? And I think a lot of time is being spent in educating the CIOs and their teams and helping them understand what are these techniques. Like I think RAG is one of the most powerful techniques that you have at hand to probably control the hallucinations or outcomes of these models, right? Now, to that,
Yes,
sorry, Victor,
yes,
continue.
I'm thinking a little bit forward in the process of adoption of generative AI. Additional aspect that CIOs are concerned about how to productionize these
Yes.
initial projects that they started. Some just stay as a pilot and they don't grow. So they say, okay, we invested, we aren't realizing the value of generative AI, or we just saw, we did a POC, for example, and that's it. How do I bring this into production? How do I scale up these projects so that the rest of the organization can start using generative AI. So one of the challenges is how these models that today I adopted are the right ones for marketing, for the contact center, maybe for sales, for sales operations, and at the same time, how do I productionize? Do I bring these models and their data uh, into production to keep it alive and to keep it fresh with evergreen content? It's another concern of the CIOs.
Absolutely. And that's where I think, we as a service organization need to probably educate CIOs. And that's what we do a lot is that to build powerful systems, you still need good amount of data, right? So it's not like the LLMs have actually help you bridge that gap. Sorry to use that term, but you have shitty data and you probably expect really good outcomes. Your data still needs to be pretty good, right? For us to probably build strong RAG models, right? But to that matter, right, I
Right.
think Amazon has done a brilliant work in terms of providing the right infrastructure. And we, since being an AWS exclusive partner, we, leverage Amazon across our implementations. And I think Bedrock probably is one of the strongest managed services that we found across hyperscalers. Obviously to host your, large language model based workflows, but more importantly, it gives you the flexibility to, experiment with as many of the LLMs that you can, including open source, closed source models, right? Why don't you probably spend some time in helping us understand what Bedrock is, number one, and probably how your partners or customers are actually leveraging Bedrock across their implementations?
That's a great question, and it's one of the most important services at this moment for generative AI in AWS. Uh, Amazon Bedrock, if you think about it, and your audience also to think about Bedrock, is like that top level service that we have, where developers can get access to foundation models, and it's a variety of foundation models that exist in AWS using just an API. They don't need to be experts in AI and ML. If they know how to invoke an API and consume a service and the other ones that exist in AWS, that's enough for them. And Amazon Bedrock provides the possibility to interact with models that come from our third-party uh, partners that we have. For example, Anthropic is one of them. Cohere, AI21, Stability AI with the Stable Diffusion, and other models or one party that I call them, like Amazon Titan for embeddings and Amazon Titan for image generation and text generation. It's bringing that variety of options to the customers. On the other hand, Amazon Bedrock has several features related to the use of agents. For example, if you just started with text generation, image generation, and now you are trying to orchestrate a process or to start using advanced features of Amazon Bedrock, agents for Amazon Bedrock is one of those options to rely on the reasoning capabilities of a model to solve a problem that you can define inside the AWS console or programmatically speaking. Uh, and things don't stop there. Of course, it is not enough just with invoking out of the box the models. You can train through Amazon Bedrock a custom model without the need to be an expert in AI and ML. And you can bring custom models using your own data that at the same time run on your private environments. These environments can be accessible in a normal way by traversing the internet or in a private way using private link to this to connect with these models. And finally, as security and transparency is important for us, uh, Amazon Bedrock implements guardrails for Amazon Bedrock, which basically what they do is to validate the inputs and outputs when interacting with these models in a well-defined way. For example, an input could be related to um, an intention that it's pernicious to try to impact the company, but also the outputs through these guardrails can be useful to verify the content that is generated that is not toxic or that it is sticking to the normal parameters that the companies use when interacting with their users. And finally, the option to evaluate the models that are used in Amazon Bedrock is another important aspect for the users. How to identify which is the best model for the task that I'm trying to solve. In this case, maybe one of the tasks that you have is in marketing to generate visual and text content. So with the options that Amazon Bedrock is bringing to the users, you can identify which one is bringing the best outputs or the outputs that are closer to the branding guidelines, to the uh, mode of communication that companies have towards the users. This is in general at a high level what I can tell you about Amazon Bedrock.
Now, I think you've covered probably the most important aspects of it. And, as a service provider, again, right, where we actually day in, day out, we work across use cases. And we just, as a consumer of Bedrock, we just fine tuned Llama 2 on Bedrock for one of our EdTech customers, right? And last year, we actually had
Absolutely.
leveraged fine tuning, or we leveraged Llama 2 as an endpoint. I think the consumability aspect of it is much faster. I think we were at least 60% faster this time, right, consuming the services, right? So absolutely, I think it's a end-to-end service, as you rightly mentioned. One obviously is platform side, but then it actually brings in the other tenets as well: experimentation, the security layer, the privacy layer, etc., etc. Right? So, I mean, I'm a big fan of Bedrock, and we've been using in at least 90% of our implementations, right? And I've been doing AWS partnership, or I've been managing AWS partnership as a partner manager, as a business development manager for almost a decade now, like Victor. And I've seen AWS has always been more partner centric. But since we started GoML last year, and since we started working on GenAI, I think this is truer than ever, right? I mean, the way we are working very closely with AWS, the way the AOs etc. are coming in. But then, how are you making sure that your partner, because your partners are primarily your heroes, right? Or they are the ones who are actually consuming the services for customers. How are you ensuring the partner ecosystem is more enabled, or what are you doing for your partner ecosystem in the GenAI space?
Thank you. There are there is a component that we have in the competency program that is related to enablement. That not only implies trying to train the partners about how to use Amazon Bedrock, for example, or other technologies that we have. Yes, it is important to work hands-on to get that experience and expertise that we expect to to bring the partners to the customers. And there is another aspect that we bring to the partners in the competency program, the possibility to get early access to certain features in, for example, in Amazon Bedrock. These features that I mentioned, for example, the models, the variety of models. One of them that I missed to say was Mistral, for example, that we have there, or the possibility to import your custom model. These features, the partners at some point can get access in a controlled way when we interact with the service team and we bring them to the table. Hey, the partners can help you to validate your features, can bring you feedback, and they also amplify the voice of the customers that they are working with about the needs that the customers have, and how this feature could improve. This is like a bi-directional relationship that we have. We bring this to the partners, the option to get early access, and the partners bring feedback and maybe new ways of using or unintended ways of using the features that the partners now discover that now they are using it and leveraging in benefit of the customers. Another aspect related to the enablement is related to the training. Training not only from the technical perspective, but also training for the sales teams that we want them to pitch the messaging that we have as AWS and generative AI to the customers to help them to understand and to establish a good dialogue, a good conversation with their customers in order to understand better the requirements, but also to communicate what is possible to do with Amazon Bedrock and in general with AWS in generative AI.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think in a continuation to that question, well, again, as I mentioned, probably I've never seen AWS to be more partner focused, right? But in continuation to that question, and this is something that's really close to your heart as well, right, Victor? Earlier this year, AWS launched Generative AI Competency, right? And while AWS is nothing new to competencies, right? I mean, we've had some really, really good competencies for partner enablement, including migration and ML competency, right? And I've been part of most of these. We got migration and ML competency in our previous, organization. And I think this time we are one of the launch partners with AWS for GenAI Competency, right? And AWS definitely has a first mover advantage because the other hyperscalers are still, I don't see any validation from partner perspective yet being launched, right? So what was the thought behind it, right? Like obviously one is that you guys probably brought in very early this partner validation, but what was the whole thought of designing this whole, competency program, and how do you think probably this validates your partners now?
Eh, that makes me think in many aspects related to the nature of my work and my origins because I've always done the retrospective that I'm always or constantly launching new things or launching things that maybe no one had talked about it, and when they realize they are already there, but I made the first step or I stepped in before them. I've done this since I was at school when no one wanted to use certain devices to streamline what they were doing. I did it, and I used to finish my courses before them. In the case of generative AI, uh, as we know, it's not new. We can think at this moment about generative AI as the new world or the new way that is here. Yes, there's a reality in that. But I was working on this type of initiatives like almost 1 year and a half ago, or maybe a little bit more when internally a couple of my me and my peers were thinking about mega models, we call them, and we were exploring the previous generation models, how they could improve the interaction with customers, improve the chatbots. That at that point we were thinking about NLU and thinking about those framed answers that were sometimes not too human, how we could improve that part. And we started using models that, of course, open source models were the best option at that time, but there were also other companies there already, like AI 21, that has trusted in AWS for a long time, I think. Uh, and to understand what they were doing and to start bringing it and growing this and converting everything into a generative AI competency, that was one of the biggest challenges that we had the last year. But that challenge not only for the company but also for ourselves, how to make things possible in almost half the time that it takes to launch the competency, and also the challenge to bring to the partners this opportunity to be part of the competency, being a launch partner. They were already working with generative AI in multiple projects. They were already using at least SageMaker Jumpstart before Bedrock was launched, and some of them were already in the process of being launch partners or early adopters of Amazon Bedrock. Uh, One of the bar that we set at that moment was to start bringing projects that were already bringing good outcomes for the customers. And we got a good response from the partners. GoML was one of them. I remember that tech validation that we have, Rishabh, when we
Yeah,
reviewed the
early
case
January.
studies. and how the outcomes and the benefits for the customers were evident in what you leverage with generative AI from AWS. So the response was super important for us. Was high response from the partners, and it keeps growing. It keeps growing. I cannot tell at this moment the number of applications that we have, but we are getting almost to three digits
Wow.
of
Okay.
partners that are trying to launch or to be part of the competency program.
Well, that makes us feel special, first of all, because we were part of those top 30 when you had launched this partnership, right? So, first of all, thanks, Victor, for that. And we've never seen back, right? I think the support, obviously, one is the funding programs, but I think more so the support from the whole tech aspect of it. And you mentioned early launches, right, for partners like us. That has been really a game changer for us to take this innovation to our customers, right? But one thing that we realized, Victor, very early in our journey, right, at GoML is that since GenAI as a technology is very nascent, and customers, including CIOs of multi-billion-dollar enterprises, do not understand the potential of this technology yet. But what probably helped us probably propagate this agenda better, or probably help customers identify or move fast, is take a use case based approach, right? And that's when we probably started building our leaderboard as well. I think we showcased that to you as well. But what are the top use cases that you are seeing, right, across the industry, again, based on your interaction with partners and customers, that are seeing the light of the day in the GenAI space?
Um, this is a question that has a couple of perspectives. The first one is when talking about cross-industry use cases. Uh, the most representative one that I've seen and that I started working uh, before generative AI was here as we know it at this moment, it's in the contact center, uh, which basically leads to customer experience. The customer experience is one of the those use cases that people is mostly passionate about because it's across industry, and it impacts always the loyalty of customers, the possibility to bring them hyper personalized experiences. Hyper personalized means this company knows me, this company knows my preferences, the way I communicate with them, how often I come and interact with these services, and also based on that level of knowledge that they have about me as a customer, I, I'm loyal and I keep spending
Excellent.
and keep buying and keep consuming those different services that could be from a telco industry as a telephony provider, or could be an internet provider, or could be an online retailer that is using generative AI for doing recommendations, for generating content that it's tailored to what I try to find out or to use. And there are other cases that are more vertical, but at the same time, uh, they impact the companies internally. For example, transformation related to how an IT service desk inside a company is supporting the employees or thinking about human resources. And in other cases, the use of generative AI for solving a certain issue related, for example, in the telco industry or telecommunications industry related to a certain communications plan or telephony plan, or finding out how to identify in an insurance industry what is the best plan for life insurance, or the best plan for car insurance, or to process a claim insurance that before was taking longer. At this moment, it could be easier by just submitting a minimum set of data, because with generative AI we can identify what is the complaint of the customer and what they were trying to do when using XYZ service. There are other aspects that, or industries that are highly impacted. For example, healthcare. When talking from a patient perspective, getting faster responses from the healthcare providers as a patient is one of the best things that is happening also to the patients and customers in general. And I can mention more cases. We can continue the rest of the podcast
I'm
about
pretty sure we
being
can. Yeah.
highly passionate, but those are different aspects that I've seen. Media and entertainment, gaming industry, energy, it's another one, sustainability, are aspects that, or companies and industries and use cases that I've seen.
No, you're absolutely right, Victor. I think we can probably have this podcast for 24 hours discussing use cases, right? But I think what you've rightly highlighted is, and this is where we are also seeing a lot of excesses when customers, our CIOs are focusing more on experience building and experience improvement rather than focusing only on productivity gains, right? Because what we've seen is when, the CIOs probably start looking only or focusing heavily only on productivity gains, there's a lot of delay in the whole adoption process, which then probably takes down the importance of the use case, right? So when they start focusing on the experience as a primary deliverable through these, Gen AI models or use cases, and then obviously productivity gains obviously becomes a natural byproduct of these is what we've also seen as a outcome, right? But one last question, Victor, that I had for you today is that you've been pivotal in a lot of these implementations, right? Since you've already taken this role, again through all your partners directly with the customers on the AWS team and so on. What is that one advice that you would want to give to the CIOs out there who want to be successful in kickstarting their GenAI strategy? Right? Because I think that's the biggest challenge that everyone is seeing right now. Right? So what's that one advice that you'd want to give?
Okay, one of the major differentiators that AWS has, and in general Amazon, is what we call working backwards. This is always connecting or thinking about the experience that your user or your customer has, even though you haven't created still that or implemented with the technology that experience or that problem that you are solving for a customer. Thinking in that way, you can always connect the business with the technology. I've seen multiple applications when trying to apply to the competency program where the challenge to that some partners bring is or candidates that they bring the challenge is technical, totally technical or technology challenge that is not connected with the business. So my suggestion for those who are starting with GenAI is think about the problem, the business problem that at this moment your customer is trying to or is facing through the services that you are offering to them, and think about how generative AI could be an enabler or transformative technology to solve that problem. Because if there's not a connection uh, between generative AI and that problem or that business outcome that you are trying to get, the value or the realized value of generative AI won't be what you expect, and this could lead to a disappointment. Think also about the security of that customer as if you were the customer. What data is important for them and for you to pay attention to keep their confidentiality? How would you protect that information? And also think about the data that you need to use to solve that problem. What data is needed? Where that data comes from? Do you have it? Does it need to be uh, readapted or needs to be transformed? Those are aspects that sound a little bit tactical, but at the same time bring you a holistic approach on what you're doing with generative AI. And at the same time, think about at this moment at what stage you are in your process or the journey of generative AI. If you don't have maybe an starting point or don't know where or how or when to start, another suggestion that I can make for you is look for external help that comes from a partner or a company that already knows how to do this, that has a proven success doing this type of onboarding and helping customers to find out how to get started with generative AI. Uh, in especially, for example, in the competency program, we talk about partners that are bringing expertise, experience, and of course, success. Successful projects are an important aspect in addition to that experience and expertise. And these companies will help you to get that level of onboarding and starting with your first or your nth implementation of generative AI projects.
Absolutely. I think brilliant piece of advice, right? One thing that you rightly mentioned, Victor, is that it needs to be a business-led transformation. It can never be tech-first transformation. And I have had, conversations where, CIOs have walked up to me and they've said, we want to implement Chat GPT, right? Or we want to implement Bedrock, or we want to implement Claude. That's not the way to approach it. And I've always pushed, back stating what's the business problem that you're trying to solve. And that's where I think the DAP program that AWS runs with partners like GoML is very handy because it allows us to do free workshops for customers. And these are very, use case focused workshops that help us understand or navigate the business process, identify the pain points, and then bring in the right technology. So, as you rightly mentioned, it can never be tech first approach. It always has to be the business led problem phase and then probably building the right or bringing the right tech right. And it's always been true and it's probably as true as it can be for the GenAI initiatives as well, right? But Victor, thank you so much for doing this. It was really great to host you on the podcast today. Very insightful session. I'm pretty sure that our listeners, especially on the CIOs and the innovation side, would love to probably hear from this. I really appreciate your presence today and obviously as a partner also the support that you've been giving. Victor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. And thanks for inviting me. As I said at the beginning, it's an honor to be here. And if there's any additional questions or concerns that you may have, please don't hesitate on visiting the AWS Competency Partners webpage and also to work with GoML, which is one of the of those partners who is part of this competency program. Thank you so much, Richard.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Victor, for doing this.